In 2005, Land Rover launched a new type of car, a proper sports utility vehicle, a car that was designed to go like stink, handle well, and still be able to tackle the wilderness as well as its siblings. It was a Range Rover GTI of sorts. It was called the Range Rover Sport. And now there's a new one in town. Land Rover says it's better than its dad in nearly every single way. Does that mean it can like dunk better or something? Maybe less of the dunking, but the new Sport is lighter, faster and slightly more useful than its predecessor. And come to think of it, it's still box fresh bigger brother. The full fat Range Rover is for ferrying execs and the elite from A to B through whatever terrain they encounter, whereas the Sport is more for going out and having a little bit of fun. This new one, thanks to its all-aluminium construction, weighs up to 420 kilos less than the old one. Now that means three things. 1, fewer emissions, 2, better MPG, and 3, more speed. All versions of the Sport have been designed to give the best on-road dynamics of any Range Rover ever. Boosting its performance pretensions are a windscreen raked back for sporting and aerodynamic reasons. It's 8% slipperier than the old car, which looked like a brick. If you're going to take the plunge, it would also be a shame to miss out on the 5-litre Supercharged V8. Because over 500 brake horsepower twinned with all the engineering in this thing means fun. Me, this thing is rapid in a straight line. Jesus, it really is. Catastrophic speed aside, I mean, this really is like sort of Range Rover GTI. You sit a lot lower in the cabin, you're more ensconced by the cockpit, everything is very close to hand. I'm loath to say like you're in a sports car, because you're not. You're in quite a tall SUV, but it feels quite light and quite quick. It's quite a strange experience, really. You don't expect something like this to have quite the turn of pace it does, and that's especially thanks to the car's dynamic mode. It does have the terrain response system that you get in a Range Rover and an Evoque, but as this is a Sport, it's important to concentrate on dynamic mode. What dynamic mode does is it basically sharpens everything up. So the steering gets a bit heavier and the throttle response gets a bit better. Everything sort of goes on to tense, ready to pounce mode. And if you stick the gearbox into Sport, and the gearbox is an absolutely beautiful 8-speed automatic, well, you've got yourself a pretty racy little car. It'll do 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. And this thing weighs around 2.5 tons. It's disgustingly fast. It actually offends me a little bit just how fast it is. But everyone likes to be offended every now and then, especially if you add in the noise of that V8. It's a 5-litre supercharged job, it's got over 500 brake horsepower, but what they've managed to do with this one is I think they've addressed a lot of complaints, because what people used to do with the old Range Rover is change the exhaust system so you could hear the V8 under the bonnet, because after all, if you paid for it, you probably want people to know you've got it. And it sounds really fruity. It's like this elegant luxury thing that sounds like a muscle car. The Sport is set up for awesome on-road driving, that's its thing, but it's actually a car of two faces. You see, Land Rover offers 2 4-wheel drive systems with this, one for off-road and one for on-road, the latter of which, incidentally, weighs 18 kilos less than the off-road one. So if you live in the countryside, you can have a car that will get very quickly up your drive. If you live in the city, well, you don't have to bother with all the off-road stuff. Similarly, the Sport's aesthetics can take more of a centre stage. You can have a Sport with 22-inch alloys. 22, that's massive and insane. But that said, when we were driving the full-fat Range Rover in Morocco last year, the support drivers, who are all accomplished off-roaderists, they were all saying that even on 20-inch alloys with road rubber, a Range was more capable now than a Defender is, which is quite interesting, especially as underneath the skin here, it's got all the same bits. as well as having all the same terrain response system and being just as capable as a Range Rover off-road. I mean, it really is. You can throw this thing at anything. The off-road system flatters you. If you're an idiot and have very little off-road experience, you can just put the terrain response into auto, stick the gearbox into low range and drive it through a riverbed or up a verge. It'll look after you so it doesn't break itself and you don't die. While it's just as capable, it's not as refined. Where the Range Rover was benchmarked for noise against the likes of the Rolls-Royce Ghost and the Bentley Flying Spur, this one wasn't. This one's a bit more noisy, a bit more engaging, a bit more sort of visceral. It grabs you by the scruff of the neck and goes, no, this is a sports SUV. You're actually going to use me for sporty stuff. And that's where the difference lies between this and the Range Rover. But what it reminds me of is actually a BMW M5, in that you can feel it's big and heavy and it's got lots of power, but dynamically it rewards you and it doesn't make you look like an idiot. It's just this one comes with the added bonus of being able to climb a mountain. Land Rover says the Sport is 45 kilos lighter model for model than the Range Rover on which it's based, and that it has 75% new parts. But that leaves me with a question. Is it a bit of a shot in the foot? You see, this will do everything the Range Rover will do off-road. It's set up for on-road driving as well, and it's a bit quicker. It's better on fuel. You can have more seats in there and seat more people, and it's smaller, so it'll be just that little bit easier to park. But what the Range Rover does over the Sport is have a little bit more elegance. Where a Range Rover is comfortable everywhere in the world, the Sport, well, it's a bit more Cineplex than Colosseum.